final plenary speaker this morning is Erica Key. Erica went to the University of Miami for her PhD, but more importantly, since she was a researcher, what Erica has been doing is leading a voice in transdisciplinary, transnational projects. She was the first executive director of the Belmont Forum, a unique funding organization that sponsors transnational transdisciplinary research. She's currently at Future Earth. She runs the global hub director for the Future Earth. And Erica is somebody who's created this new conference, the Sustainability Research Innovation Conference, SRI. We recently were in Panama, and I got to see Erica dressed with Panamanian hats and traditional Panamanian dancers, really showing off her dancing skills. But really glad that Erica could come and give us this inspiration about these innovative ways of working together, these novel approaches. Erica.
Thank you so much. I have a script, but I tend to get passionate about what I do, and I don't always color within the lines. So we'll see where this goes. I'll have to move it over so I can read. Wonderful. So transdisciplinarity, what is that? Is it the milkshake of science? Is it a blending together of ideas? There's a lot of terminology that approximates what transdisciplinarity is. It goes from co-implementation, all of the co's that you hear in participatory science, integration, et cetera, to looking at how we contextualize research in terms of place-based knowledge, working towards peace building, reducing tensions through the collaborative work of integrating sort of different perspectives within an academic space with lived experience. I mean, how many of you have something that you do outside of science that you feel very strongly about? You don't have a degree in it. You know, I'm a musician. I don't have a degree in music, but I like to talk authoritatively about some kinds of music. Does that minimize my input in a conversation because I don't have a degree in it? We all have something that is lived and experiential that we would like to contribute. Now, we come together to co-create options, and I do not use the word solutions because nothing is ever solved. We're part of a living, changing system. We do what we can to address our current or our near-term context, but that continual evolution makes it critically important that we build long-term trust relationships with our communities, but more on that later. Okay. What is the value of a transdisciplinary approach? So at a very high level, transdisciplinary co-design and co-implementation has the potential for transformation, to inform decisions that change policy and practice. But it's also a critical tool for achieving sustainability in its many incarnations. So not just at the Sustainable Development Goals scale, but also at the community scale. Sustainability is a human construct. So the pursuit of sustainability requires engagement with a client or a community or a user group to inform the pathway forward and recognize our impact, whether it's economic, social, or environmental. I love using this test case. This was the Jordan Water Project that was funded under the Belmont Forum. It was coming together of many different scientists in many different countries to look at the delivery of water in Jordan. It had to integrate remote sensing data that looked at the siphoning off of water by Saudi Arabia by looking at crop circles from space, looking at the influence of the Syrian conflict on agriculture in the northwest corner of Jordan, looking at the black market for water and resale, bringing all of these pieces together with the Minister of Water of Jordan to say, how can we change this? How can we deliver water? Now, what's the value proposition for a minister to be part of what might be seen as a largely academic project? How convincing is it to a constituency when you say not, oh, I saved you so many billion rial of, vague monies this year, but I gave you water. He got reelected. He got his part out of it. The scientists got their part of it. Jordan got water. Everybody wins. So in terms of outcomes from transdisciplinary research, there are both these concrete outcomes that you might, put in your broader impact statements for funding, about scholarly exchange and marketability and community support. But there's also these more nuanced effects and advancements that are also important. Sometimes they're termed soft skills, but really this is what is advancing us as a society. So being able to transform policy or practice is a major outcome of a transdisciplinary exchange. Now, the research enterprise is not fully ready. It's not currently optimized to achieve these goals, and we've had several feedback sessions that let us know where some of those roadblocks or obstacles are. I'm going to cover a few of those in this conversation today to see how I am hopeful about us moving together as one in a transdisciplinary fashion. So one limitation has been the funding relationships necessary to build community trust, to co-define the problem and the potential pathways, to identify and engage with broader stakeholder groups, and implement and scale those transformations. The different sectors and modalities of resourcing working together are needed to achieve this full cycle in the complexity wheel. One of the issues that we struggle with most in trying to weave together different resources from foundations, from private sector, from capital markets, from agency or ministry funding is language. So there are platforms that are building some of these relationships, like the Finance Ecosystem for Systemic Transformation, the World Economic Forum, Belmont Forum, and the UN Science Policy Business Forum. They're increasing familiarity in language, in work culture, value propositions, and decision-making processes. And as we recognize the complementarity of those different funding strengths and a shared vision of deep impact, so not your typical ROI, they're not looking for a monetary return anymore. They're really wanting to sort of take credit for that social change, for that transformation, sort of like I gave you water. There is hope that we may be able to develop more vertical funds or really phased funding. If you think back to the complexity wheel, there are strengths amongst the different capital resources at different stages in that process, but nobody wants a handoff. We did this, it was great, now you go fund it. That doesn't work. It doesn't work in science either. So we have to build those relationships, and we have to move beyond some of this language that stymies us, the culture. Attending a philanthropic alliance meeting, we sometimes open with meditation and candles. You're not going to get that at NSF, just going to say. There's no meditation and candles before a multi-agency funder meeting. So there is an element of psychology and behavior change that goes into this, and I'm happy to discuss more about developing that resource ecosystem with you later. So onward to the institutional changes that I think need to take place, and I might spend a bit of time on this slide just given the audience. How do we prepare the workforce of the future to be ready for this more collaborative, respectful, equitable partnerships with other experts, with professionals, community members, with different lived experiences? So why is it in science, unlike the schools of business, law, medicine, and engineering, that we put the greatest value on graduates remaining within the system that trained them, instead of developing practitioners that take that learning into new dimensions? Why do we want to build mini-me's? If I'm trained in scientific methods and I choose to pursue a career in another sector and not mimic the career path of my mentor, why am I considered a loss for science? Am I not a trusted partner? Am I not using that training to create value in other sectors? Other ways that we might be able to improve would to be build on some language and skill bridges, recognizing that words like sustainability and data means something different across many schools of the university. I just came back from Vienna from the UN Science Policy Business Forum meeting on data for the Environmental Alliance. We're sitting in a room with all people who consider themselves to be data specialists. I tell you, the Lloyd's Green Banking representative, when they're talking about data that is driving the investment of large amounts of money in environmental or environmentally friendly companies, they're not talking about data in the same way as public-private, satellite consortia or citizen science organizations. We're talking at each other and past each other, not together. So, how do we build that common understanding and that respect for someone else's version of data? How do we look at this building from an engineering standpoint, from a corporate standpoint, a scientific standpoint, and say it's sustainable and we're all thinking the same thing? Or at least we're understanding what they mean when an engineer says that's a sustainable design. It's not always the same thing. How can universities become more nimble, producing graduates that have the skills, understanding, and adaptability to stay competitive in an increasingly machine-enabled workspace? We heard about ChatGPT earlier, a lot of the developing AI, which is the OA I used to do for satellite remote sensing, on corporate steroids now. So how about we embrace some crosscuts like business for science, law for science? I work quite a bit with colleagues in Africa, and a lot of them are waiting for someone to die to get an academic position. There's just not enough. So they're being encouraged to go into the green entrepreneurial space, but 99% of green startups fail within the first 2 years. How successful could they be if they had some business training and skills? Why do we not look at that mashup within the US? On the same lines, how many times have I heard we need more science for policy? If only our lawmakers knew about this new finding, it would all be better. But most of those policy briefs make it as far as the staffer. They're not being argued on the floor. They're not the end means in the decision. Constituency is a big part of that. How do we change the understanding of the constituents that are electing the representatives that are then making the laws? European Parliament is on top of this. They're really trying to advance data and informed decision-making, particularly for health. But let's look at how we can move past just developing briefs that stop at the staffer level and underpin an expanding amount of regulation. The last bullet on this slide is a tip of the hat to those educational centers that have been working with communities for decades to centuries and are just as responsible, if not more, at training the workforce of tomorrow. So how can we develop equitable relationships with community colleges and R2 institutions to really learn best practices in belonging, acceptance, diversity, and justice? This isn't about poaching their best students, but having the humility to recognize their contributions and how they provide a safe space for all to learn and dream and achieve. Perhaps one way forward on this last point is to redesign leadership and embrace a more representative, participatory design It's akin to developing a board, but it's to engage in a collective leadership model that strengthens and informs our joint pathway forward. It's a new concept of not the single leader, but the leader as a movement, a coalition of the willing coming together, working through those thorny issues, and leveraging that diversity for a more rich and nuanced approach. Sorry, we're on a delay. Okay, all of these efforts to transform, though, in research and innovation, in education and skill building, and in supporting a workforce of the future are most successful when they can articulate their impact in a transparent way. This is not just about funding. You know, funders are constantly looking for impact, but it's also in communicating to that constituency, to stakeholders, to people that you want to partner with. But impact assessment is not universally taught and can be a difficult quantity or quality to capture if you don't have a foundational framework. We ran a proposal, actually a cohort of projects together with the European Commission on food, water, energy nexus in the Sustainable Urbanization Global Initiative. And we said, what is the impact of your urban living lab together with mayors in major cities across Europe? What is the impact? And it was just blank stares, kind of like, you know, what is she talking about right now? And we said, can you imagine the economic impact of growing vegetation on the outside of all of the buildings in this particular town? Can you look at the environmental impact? Do you understand the social impact? There's not training for that. So the question is whether or not we integrate that training to be able to make that message very clear, or do we work with those who are experts in that field? Either way, you know, it's highly needed. This is the space we are living in, and if we're not able to communicate that, we kind of diminish what we're producing. Ethics is key in this space as well. If you're not thinking about your potential impact, you're not aware of the unintended impacts. This works a lot in the AI space, but it is universal in its application. We have a lot of groups that create indicators that are not realistic. I work very closely with a group on Earth observations, and I heard their new emotional intelligence strategy. And the number one indicator for success is a reduction in the number of lives lost. Okay, I saw that there was a volcano that was exploding from remote sensing, and I didn't go outside or I didn't travel to that country, so my life has been saved. Let me report that to GEO. How are they going to measure this? How are they going to show success in this program? And the last part is about reporting and addressing gaps. Again, here, reporting, it's one of those wide words, but environmental, social, and governance reporting, carbon reporting, soon to be biodiversity reporting, there's a lot of gaps in there. And they're being filled more and more by AI. How do we address those gaps? How do we address the fuzziness of that? And how can we be assured that the reporting is clear, transparent, and apples to apples? My last area of hopeful change is centered on an ages-old power dynamic that has now taken a significant and powerful digital turn. He, she, or they who holds the most information holds the power. Accelerating that for today's audience becomes how do we resolve the tension between the push for open data and open science and AI-driven decision-making? How do we address the whole-scale scraping of the internet and the large-scale generation of AI-enhanced data sets for determining futures that are currently being driven by the North? How do we understand and not just regulate, but compliance check digital tools that are being broadly applied within sometimes hazy attribution and error characterization? I'm a member of an open research funders group, and one of the big tech alliances were in there, and they said, we're fully open, we're fully transparent. I said, that's amazing, because when I was at the National Science Foundation, it took 60% of my time to compliance check openness of data within the funded projects. And they said, well, we're open, we're as open as we believe we are. So no compliance checking. We say we're open, we're open. How do we actually put some wheels in motion, maybe use AI for good to check the compliance of some of those big tech organizations? I'm really struggling. I'm at a crossroads now because for 20 years I've been pushing open science, open data, that we need to be transparent, that public sector funds mean that understanding needs to be shared in an accessible way, in an applicable way. And now I see my colleagues in low and middle income countries finally reaching that potential, only for a global north organization to come in and scrape everything that they have made available and to have those decisions being turned against them. In the financial world, fintech, it's closing banks in the global south. The context is not there. We're applying global north strategies to the global south in a very large and powerful way now. Context is everything. These countries have their own AI. They have their own understanding and ways of doing. How do we decolonize our approaches with digital technologies? How do I walk the line between openness and the consumption of data, and am I the only one worried? So just quick show of hands, how many of you accepted the most recent Twitter or X terms and conditions without even reading them? Yeah, so I mean, I like data, I live in data, I didn't check them fully. If I'm somebody who likes data and didn't check it, the people who don't like data that we work with, how are they being affected by these things? Is it possible to get the public to care about data and sovereignty of data? Forget about Twitter, but in countries far removed from us. So just to wrap up, I turn back to my graphic and hope that we can make the last mile of transformation. You'll notice in this shaded area, we're all in here, but it's an area we've shied away from or thought somebody else is responsible for that part. And by ceding our role in completing the transformative loop, we've broken the circle. Are we not all stakeholders when it comes to sustainability? But we're not without tools, pathways, and most importantly, a coalition of the willing to make the change. So just a little time for self-promotion. Keeping with the theme of grandmothers today, I want to invite you all to help advance this together at the next Sustainability Research and Innovation Congress, which I tell people is not your grandmother's science conference. It's interactive, action forward. It's not PowerPoints in the dark or bad coffee in beige rooms. We'll be in Finland in June of 2024, and hopefully this isn't being broadcast live, but we're coming to the US in 2025. We'll be in Chicago. We'd love to see you there. We're also hoping to inspire you to imagine what would happen if climate change went right. Be positive. What does a science-informed positive future look like? So the Climate Parables Anthology explores this concept with science futures literature written by scientists with technologies and approaches that are available right now. We invite you to read these stories and join us for a future performance. Thank you.